But I just want to say hello and welcome to Audubon After Dark, Bird Story Hour version. So my name is Jacqueline Downey. I'm an educator with Audubon Rockies. And with me, I have Keith Bruno and Zach Hutchinson, who are my fellow educators. And we're going to be on hand to help moderate and to troubleshoot. So if you have questions, please reach out to us. Audubon Rockies exists in Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. And I'm so glad to have you here. If you haven't been here before, Bird Story Hour is an opportunity to share our experiences with birds and nature. I know we're all coming from different homes and different locations, but we're all connected, and it is never more apparent than when we come together like this. So thank you so much for being here. Tonight, we have a special treat. We are going to kick things off with a guest storyteller, and I am so pleased to introduce Daniel Wildcat. Daniel comes to us from Oklahoma, where he is a Yuchi member of the Muskogee Nation, a professor at Haskell Indian Nations University, a founding member of the Hiawatha Center for Justice, a leader in the Indigenous Peoples Climate Change Working Group, among many other impactful endeavors, and author of several books, one of which is coming out very soon, next month, and it is titled On Indigenuity, Learning the Lessons of Mother Earth. Welcome, Daniel.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight with all of you. I've really been looking forward to this since I received the invite. So, yeah, let me so say in my Zoyaha language, my Yuchi language, Sanle Oyagasata, Fasan, Sangeli, Zoyaha, Yuchiha, Muskogee, Shadane, Boshita Atane. What I said in my Yuchi language was both thank you and then good evening. I hope you're doing well. I am a Zoyaha, a Yuchi member of the Muskogee or Creek Nation of Oklahoma. And my name is Wildcat, Daniel Wildcat. And yeah, so, you know, it's hard to speak briefly about birds, but a couple of things sort of popped up in my mind that was really important to share. And the first one is just the pure joy of being out of doors with birds. And I came across, you know, so I am a professor, and so I spend a lot of time reading, and I read very widely. I read everything. I read scientific reports, I read poetry, I read news reports, magazines, and my one guilty pleasure is I still do receive a paper copy of the Sunday New York Times, and I can read that all week long, right? And I can recycle the paper, so that gives me some, I think, leeway, as long as, you know, I'm going to do some recycling with it. But there was an interesting piece that provoked me to think about the story I wanted to share tonight. And some of you may have seen it. It was in the October 8th New York Times Magazine. And there's a little piece in here by a man named Harvey Dickinson, and it's called Practicing Outside. And it's about a man who said in the middle of COVID, being trapped inside, he got this idea that, you know, had a lot of spare time on his hand, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't go outside. So he thought he'd get his old saxophone out from up in the attic or wherever. And he started practicing it, and he realized right away that his neighbors in his apartment in New York City probably didn't appreciate him playing his saxophone. So he had this great idea. He thought, well, why don't I just go outside, living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan? Why don't I just walk over to the river and play my sax? And so he got into this habit of every day walking over to the river and playing his sax. And in it, he relates that one of the things that really surprised him is there was a goose with little ones that was in the area, and his wife apparently was notorious as, he said, known as the Goose Lady. But, you know, he noticed that whenever he would come play, the mother and all these little geese would come right to the riverside and sit while he played his saxophone. When he laid it down, they'd go on and take off again. But he said, I noticed whenever I would start playing my music, they would come and listen. And he said, best fans I've ever had. Well, I had a similar experience I wanted to share with you all that happened just this last spring. I do my best work outside. I'm lucky I have a large deck on the east side of my house, a large deck on the south side. So when I really need the shade and the cool, I can, in the afternoon, I can go to the west side of the house. When early morning, I want to get that sun, whatever, I can sit on the south side. Do most of my writing out there. I really do my best writing out of doors. And I, this summer, got up one Sunday morning, and after kind of getting tired of reading the Times, I grabbed my guitar and I was sitting on the back deck. And all of a sudden, I noticed as I was playing my guitar, there was these birds in the locust tree, not 15 feet from me, a very large locust tree. And they just all started singing. And I thought, wow. Now, you know, I'm going like, oh, Dan, don't be anthropomorphizing. That doesn't have anything to do with you. They're not like us. You know, they're different. They're birds. They're bird people. But I just started playing, and I was playing these very open harmonic chords and things. And I just wanted to do it to see, hey, if I keep playing, are these birds going to really, it was like a symphony. It was incredible. And so for about 3 or 4 minutes, that went on. It only ended when my beagle came out the back door and started barking, and he didn't think as highly of my guitar playing, I think, as those birds in the tree. But this article just reminded me of that. I just read this a couple of weeks ago, and I was going like, you know, this is one of the blessings we have in this life, and I think it's one that I really highly value. I told you I like being out of doors. I do a lot of writing and reading out of doors. I'd rather be out of doors than inside. And so I wanted to relate that story and sort of tie it in with the fact that we were one of the first. I live in a part of Lawrence. Some of you may be familiar with it. If you're familiar with Lawrence, there's Massachusetts Street goes right across the river on the north side of the downtown of Lawrence, and it cuts all the way through to the south edge of Lawrence. And I live like 5 blocks west of that and west of downtown, kind of between downtown and the University of Kansas. But what's interesting is that I kept thinking about, you know, this joyful relationship, and I remembered we were one of the last people. We have an old home, a very old 2-story home in a neighborhood called Old West Lawrence, and we were one of the last people to bite the bullet and get central air. And I mean, I'm talking only about 7-8 years ago. And that morning on the back deck, and I've thought about this often, but it really reminded me what I lost when we got central air, because we always had the windows open. And I love the fact that I didn't need an alarm clock, because about 5:30 in the morning, the birds would start singing. This is an old neighborhood, so I've got big old trees all around. And I remembered what joy to wake up in the morning hearing these birds singing. And So the story I wanted to share, and I've got a bunch of more I could share, but this one I wanted to start with today is about the sheer joy of sharing a life on this thin blue blanket our Mother Earth wears, we call the biosphere, with birds. We don't have to pay them anything. We don't need a credit account to listen to their music. And I think it's a real gift. And I thought I would just share that with you tonight as a way to get us started. That's my bird story. Now, I'd like to think that there was some kind of connection going on, just as a this man, what did I say his name, Harvey Dixon, who wrote this marvelous piece in the New York Times Magazine about his saxophone and the geese. Well, I'd like to think that this morning last spring, that there was something there that maybe the birds were enjoying the fact that, oh, here's something we can sing with or sing, in communion with. I don't know if that's the case, but it sure felt good to be playing the guitar and to have this symphony of birds just joining in. And I did it for, like I said, about 3 minutes. I tried different chords and things. And I thought, well, let me see if I can do a little harmonizing with the birds. I tried to let them do the lead and see if I could find some chords that matched. And for that 3 or 4 minutes, that was a beautiful part of my Sunday morning, and I'm thankful for that. And so that's the story I have to share with you tonight. Anyway, thank you, Sanlei, for the invitation to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. At this time, we can open up to some reflections or thoughts that you may have. You can unmute yourself if you'd rather comment in the chat. You're welcome to do that. And again, if you had planned on participating as a storyteller, put that in the chat if you would, so that we know that we can call on you to tell a story next. And while you're thinking of your questions and comments, the way that it works is you'll have a time to tell a story for about 5 minutes. You don't have to tell a story, but obviously you can tell. It's a very open and welcoming place to do so. And sort of the same thing, you'll have a chance to comment and ask questions of the storyteller when it is their turn. So, do we have any questions or comments for Daniel? Daniel, I do have a question. Would you like me to put where you can purchase your upcoming book from Fulcrum Publishers in the chat? Would that be helpful, or did you?
Oh, that would be very much appreciated. Yes.
Okay.
So this book, Indigenuity, Learning the Lessons of Mother Earth, is just a kind of, putting together of the notion of indigenous with ingenuity, and I just called it Indigenuity. The fact that, so many people think of the knowledge and wisdom that tribal people have as all in the past. And I wanted to write a book about how the knowledge is living, just like any people. Knowledge grows, it evolves. And so there are many of my relatives today across North America doing exercises of indigenuity. They are taking ancient knowledge and wisdom and applying it to solve very modern problems we face today. So thank you. Yeah, but if you could put that in the chat, I'd really welcome that.
Absolutely. All right, so we're getting some really nice chats here. I'm just going to read out a few of them. One is, thank you for your stories. I love the detail image that was created in my mind about the saxophone and the birds. I agree, Stacy. I'm inspired to and moved to go out and try to play my instrument with the birds. I would love to hear how that goes. And another one is a beautiful story and reminder of how connected we are. Keith, thank you for the imagery of sitting around a campfire. And it's so funny because I have a little lit candle here. Whoops, screen doesn't like that, but I do have a lit candle here. So I do feel like I'm sitting by a campfire with you all, which is really nice. Really nice.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment too, because I was just telling Jacelyn before we started, we got a few minutes on before we invited you all in here. I said, I really like the title of the program, After Dark. And I was telling her just today, had a discussion with my students about, in many tribal traditions, some of you I know are aware of this, but in many tribal traditions, the time for storytelling does not start till the nights grow longer, the days grow shorter. And what did we do when we went in our lodges, when we went in our hogans, when we went in our teepees, our earth lodges? Well, we did what people used to do, and thankfully Audubon does occasionally. We sat around a fire and we told stories. And I think I really like the title of your program because that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the fact that, this is what we really need to do. I think, our society would be so much healthier, I think, if we were living in such a way that we could bring back that tradition of families, of kin, telling stories around a campfire in front of an open hearth or fireplace at night. And I think we'd be in much better shape than having our children looking at this all the time. Now, I don't want to diss this technology too much. We're using it tonight, right? We're in that flat screen realm. But again, I'd say, well, we're using it in a way that's very ancient. We're using it to share stories. And they're stories that are told to us, by relatives, by kin. And we're not having stories sold to us on a flat screen by corporations. And I think we're better off going back to that older storytelling tradition. Yeah.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Daniel. Thank you. Well, I feel like we've got some shy storytellers out tonight, which is fine. And I did neglect to remind everybody that it is in the spirit of the seasons changing. If your story, we do have a loose theme sometimes with our story hours, and this one is a spooky theme for October, but also the changing of seasons. The fact the fall is coming, or feeling, a new season approaching. Maybe you're inspired to tell a story about an animal that reminds you of fall. Feel free to go ahead and do that. Okay.
Well, Yuchi's always have a story to tell. And like I said, I've got a lot of stories I can share. So while people are thinking of maybe something they might like to share, let me read you a poem that's in my new book on Indigenuity, learning the lessons of Mother Earth. And it features birds prominently, okay? And so I'm going to read that to you. This is a preview. Now, the book is not poetry. What I did is I started writing poetry about 7 or 8 years ago because I do a lot. My work's in science, is in, that interrelationship, that interface between physical science, natural science, and social science. And so, I started, when I was totally exhausted reading scientific journals and technical articles, I thought, I'm going to pick up some poetry. And I really fell in love with it. And it's probably been about 15 years ago. And then about 10 years ago, I started saying, well, I think I'd like to, try writing poetry. So I'm going to read you a poem that's relative to the changing of seasons and sort of what I was observing. This was a poem I wrote in fact, I think I put a date on it, on November 2nd in 2019. So this is pre-COVID, right before COVID, okay? But I'd been sitting out on my side deck, the south deck, and I wrote this poem. So I hope you enjoy it. It's called A Time for Mending, okay? And it goes like this. Things change. Yes, I know. But change is different now. Nature moves through cycles with patterns, rhythms, and seasons. All are at odds with what we once knew. First snow, the 30th of October. A hint of winter last night, and now another November 2nd. I saw a solitary junco at noon, a harbinger of winter. Yet, late that afternoon, a pair of doves. The small birds disappeared weeks ago. Where? I worry. And still, the ambient light of sunrises and sunsets remains so beautiful. If painted as seen, many would scoff at such bright colors and deep hues. What romanticism. A lone robin just appeared, as if a prayer answered. Look around and listen. The leaves and the sounds they make are different now. There is lots of mending to be done. The biosphere blanket that covers our mother is torn and worn thin. Yes, it's time to start mending our ways. So I've got some poetry such as this that I've situated in between my chapters, which are really it's really more a collection of essays. And the essays, I just sort of put them all together to make a piece, if you will, a quilt, and sent it to my publisher, and he liked it. We worked on it a little while, but I told him I want to situate some of these poems as segues, and that's one of the poems that appears in on Indigenuity. So I thought I'd share that because it has a few birds in there too, because that's what I was observing that day.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I really enjoyed that. And I sort of winced a little bit, being reminded that, yes, sometimes on October 31st, we also get snow here in Wyoming, more often than not.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the quilt, using quilt to describe it. So very nice. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to also share, so I don't know if you liked our logo, the Audubon After Dark logo. We have these stickers, and anybody who shares a story receives a Audubon After Dark sticker. It is holographic. I can tell you that it is the most popular sticker of every sticker that we possibly have at Audubon Rockies, and it flies off the shelf. When we're at booths and things like that. They're the first to go. They're the first to disappear. So it can too be yours. So I have that here for you. Daniel, of course, you'll be getting a special package as well.
I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, well, we do have a volunteer storyteller that we can get started with, and that is Dusty Downey. Not sure if you're still willing or still on. And in the meantime, that gives someone else 5 minutes or less to put your names to storyteller in the chat, and we will call on you. Of course, again, we are the nicest audience that you could have, so please don't be afraid. All right, Dusty, feel free to jump in.
Perfect. Well, I think we're all just a little intimidated, Daniel. That was your imagery and your poetry are absolutely fabulous. So that was both inspiring and really, really wonderful to listen to. And so it's definitely hard to think about trying to follow that act. But one of the things I was thinking about as part of the theme of changing of seasons was one of the things as a fledgling, as a birder, I try to do is really get in tune. There you go, in tune with the bird songs. And so I've been really trying hard to go out and listen to bird songs and really be able to identify birds by the songs. And one of the things, on the technological front that I have been using recently is a thing called a haiku box. And what this does is it records the bird songs. Those are then analyzed, and then it sends back and it tells me what kind of birds were out around the box. And I've been sitting outside on our porch listening to the birds, trying to kind of match those up with the haiku box and how it records some of those songs, and you can play them back, and then trying to do some identification, which we've been really fortunate. We've got some really cool ones, everything from yellow-rump warblers and some of the mountain bluebirds, just some really wonderful songs that I'm hearing played back for the migration that's happening right now. But one of the funny ones was it came up on the Cornell or on the app on the phone that we had a short-eared owl. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And so I played the recording back off of the box, and lo and behold, it was not a short-eared owl. In fact, it was our pet pig, Panda, who was snorting right near the box, and somehow that got mistaken for a short-eared owl. So while I had a good laugh, I was a bit disappointed that we didn't have a short-eared owl hanging out in the the cottonwood trees outside of the house, and so, but it definitely made me laugh a little bit how technology is super helpful, but it can definitely throw us awry as well. So been really enjoying that, and yeah, I got a good chuckle out of that. So
Sunlay, thank you so much for sharing that, Dusty. A great story. I love it.
Yes, thank you for that. All right. This is your cue if anybody would like to tell a story. I know that it's so nice to be able to tell or to hear these stories. This whole this program was inspired by, well, two inspirations. The first being Audubon California, which is our sister program in California. They created this program in the shadow of the pandemic as a way to connect people, and we just felt like it was so lovely that we wanted to try to do it here in our region as well. And they were inspired by Moth podcast. So if any of you have ever heard the Moth podcast, it is people who of all walks of life, anybody comes up and they tell a story that is meaningful or impactful to them, or makes them laugh, or something that made them grow or learn. And it is just so much fun to listen to that podcast. If you haven't done it and you're on a drive, or you're trying to avoid your boring chores that must be done, then I highly recommend taking a listen, because it's very similar and it's so nice. Okay, We have some storytellers. Thank you so much. And as you're telling a story, you're welcome to keep your video off if you're more comfortable that way, but you're also welcome to turn your video on and share as well. Okay, so I see Ryan Gannon.
Hello.
Hi there.
So the last story also sort of reminded me of this one because it is another sort of misidentification. When I moved here to Colorado to go to college at the Colorado School of Mines, I was taking a friend birding one morning in Golden, and not a lot of people are out, and us with our binoculars are pretty clear that we're out there looking for birds. And a man comes up to us and says, starts a conversation, says, "Have you seen anything today?" And then tells us that the last few days, as I've been walking, I've been seeing a big hawk perched next to the bridge. And so as this tip, we're both very excited to go and see this hawk that he's talking about. So we say thank you, and we go along. And as we come up to the overpass, the bridge where he's been seeing it, I see what I'm pretty sure he's talking about. It's a big bird. It has, you know, the coloration you'd expect from a lot of hawks, kind of that white and brown and kind of darker black as well, speckled. And so I get very excited. I get a little closer and I look with my binoculars, and it is not a hawk. It is the largest pigeon I have ever seen. And so it was a kind of a delightful surprise, just of how silly it was. We were expecting a hawk, and we see kind of a goofy big pigeon that I completely understand why he thought it was a hawk. And so since then I've referred to him as Big Pidge, and hoping that one day my path crosses him again.
I love it.
Great story. Thank you for sharing, Ryan.
Yes, thank you. All right, we have another. Oh, sorry, please, if you have thoughts, questions, or if you wanted to put something into the chat inspired by Ryan's story, then please feel free to do that. But we do have another volunteer, Cynthia Bowe.
Hi there. Yeah, the musical piece is what's triggering me. I remember a couple years ago I was at Lake Powell and pulled over into one of the rest areas, and I could not figure out what the singing was. It was just really not ever anything that I had heard a bird do. And I look over and there's a crow on the back of a bench that faces out to the water. And these benches have metal covers over them so that people can sit in the shade. And the crow was mimicking other birds and just delighting in the sound of his own voice echoing off of this metal roof. And I didn't know that they were mimicking birds. And the only other person in the parking lot was someone who was this crow enthusiast and knew all these incredible facts about them and explained the whole thing to me. And I was just seeing if I could get the video up to play it. And I don't know how to merge my video with the Zoom, but it was the most bizarre thing. And sometimes I'll just listen to it because it was a completely different sound than I'd ever heard before. So
Wow. Wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that.
sure.
Yeah.
There is something fun about witnessing animals, and particularly birds, when they do something and there's some sort of self-awareness of what's happening. So I think of my cat, who will come across our dog unexpectedly and will jump up and you know, and then has such a funny list, very embarrassed look upon her when she realizes that she scared herself. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. Well, do we have any other storytellers out there? Anyone like to share a story? Don't be shy. Well, this is not also another bird story, but right now, I'm not sure, you probably can't hear, but we live in the northeast part of Wyoming, and we live on a ranch, and there are coyotes. I wish I could play it for you so you could hear, but there are just coyotes out there, and just howling away, and I just love it. It's my favorite. Something about when it gets really cold and chilly, and you know, when they're howling and it's crisp night air, there's just something really magical about that. So,
Yes. Cynthia's story reminded me of another story I've got to share. I had, you know, it's funny when we start sharing stories, see, that triggers you to think about something that you hadn't necessarily planned on sharing. But so this is about probably, honestly, 20 years ago, at least 20 years ago, maybe even a little longer than that. But I was doing some training. And that's one of the things I used to do in the summers. I would do workshops for federal agencies and stuff. And I got invited to go to the Social Security Administration headquarters in Baltimore, Maryland. And it's not near the harbor. It's away from the harbor, but, you know, kind of a suburban area of Baltimore. I couldn't exactly tell you how to get there if someone dropped me in Baltimore again, but I know we headed away from the harbor out west. And some of you, if you've ever lived in Baltimore, you may know where this is at. But anyway, the story is, you know, it was in the summertime and inside all day long and everything. And when lunchtime came, I decided, look, I'm going to just grab a sandwich in the cafeteria and I'm going to go sit outside and eat my sandwich, right? So I did. Well, the only place, you know, there's a small green area with a tree and a bench and everything, and surrounded by parking lots. Okay, so everyone's driving their parking lots to go to work at the Social Security Administration. And immediately, because I had at the time in my neighborhood here in Lawrence, Kansas, I had a very active mockingbird. So I hear this mockingbird and it's starting to go through its rotation of songs. Oh, it had, you know, the greatest hits of the songbirds of Baltimore. And then after about this sequence or 6 or 7 of these songs, and I'm interested in if anyone else has ever experienced this or heard this before, I get a siren. This bird does a police siren. I mean, he nails it. And then he does a car alarm, like when someone, you know, their alarm thing goes, he does start singing this car alarm. And I'm going like, I can't believe this, you know. And then I got to thinking, well, it makes perfect sense. This is where he lives. This is what he hears. And so the mockingbird, with very good repertoire of human invented sounds. And I thought that was so cool. I remember when I got back to Lawrence, I was telling my wife this story. I said, you know, our mockingbird's going to have to step up its game, because I heard a mockingbird in Baltimore and it could do police sirens, car alarms. And it was just marvelous. I wonder if anyone else has ever heard a mockingbird do that, because you would have to be in an urban area, I suspect, where you were around those kinds of sounds, but it makes sense. So he had heard those enough that that mockingbird decided he was added those to his repertoire. And anyway, so yeah, another interesting bird story, I think.
I like that. And I do, I mean, birds are so amazing for their vocalizations and honestly, just for their intelligence. And I
Yeah,
don't think
really.
we quite have enough credit or have as much of an understanding as we could or maybe will in the future. But
yeah,
it's really amazing. Which this brings me to the question for you all. As we're talking about being in fall and the changing of the seasons, and I guess maybe if you want to just put in the chat what bird is your favorite fall or autumn or spooky sort of bird that you think of. Go ahead and share in the chat, or if you would like to take yourself out on mute, you can try that and tell us about that as well. I'm seeing a barn owl. Absolutely. I've seen these baby barn owls that look like aliens in the barn. Crows. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And birds that have been getting our attention also. We've had harriers in a little bit, larger group than we normally do, which is always really fun to see. Vultures, and we have kingfishers. Oh, kingfishers are just amazing. We do bird banding. Sometimes we'll catch them, and they are just pterodactyls. They are magnificent. Oh, and loons. We were just talking about this last night, how much we wished we had, because we do get loons nearby, but we could hear them at night. That would be amazing. They do have the best and spookiest vocalizations. Agree with the great horned owls. They always do signal change in season. Golden crowned kinglets. Yes. Cutest little birds. As cute goes. For those of you that could see the screen, I have a background I have a mural in my background, and it is it's from the Audubon's mural project, which its purpose was to draw attention to birds that are threatened by climate change and just sort of the things that are happening around that. And I guess if you want to, the warblers are a big, seasonal change. Get to see a lot of different birds this time of year as they're moving in and out. And bonus points if anybody can name all 5 of these warblers. In the meantime, we have juncos are being mentioned as a sort of species that we're seeing, or bird that we're seeing. And yes, the starling formations and the sandhill cranes. I do love to hear them go overhead as well. I find it so fascinating for us here where we're at. It's like you could set your clock by them. They will be here the first week of April, and they will be here the first week of October. And I've yet to see that vary. So, yeah. So I'm not seeing any. So we do trivia as part of Audubon After Dark as well. And so next month's Audubon After Dark will be a trivia night. But I don't see anybody taking me up on my bird trivia identification on these guys, these warblers in my background. Oh, Keith has a question about whether anybody would be willing to tell of a spot spotting the sandhill cranes in their area, or for that matter, juncos. Juncos are winning right now. They are getting the most love tonight on our chat. So again, if you'd like to take yourself off mute you are most welcome to do so, to share any of that. I saw a crow, but did I see a raven? I haven't seen a raven. A raven is also a big sort of fall bird, perhaps, that people think of when they're thinking of a spooky bird or a spooky season. Okay, I'm going to give everybody just another minute to see if they can answer the trivia of these warblers in my mural here in the back. JM has mentioned that sandhill cranes left the Berkshires. Am I saying that correctly? And Keith was just curious, how recently did they leave? It's interesting to think that it's connection between, here in Wyoming where we see them, and then also in Massachusetts, that we're connected in that way as well. Flyways are something that we all share and get to have joy from. So we'll go ahead and we will sign off for the evening, but first I will give you your answer to the trivia of the mural birds in my background. I want to remind you all that next month, it's the third Thursday, we will have another trivia, and then another story hour will be the second Thursday in December, not the third Thursday as we normally do. So that's December 14th is another bird story hour, so you can keep your eye out on the events page of the website so that you can register for any and all of those events. Again, I would love to thank Daniel for joining us and sharing all of your stories and your poems and your wisdom. I cannot wait to read your book next month and get to experience the quilt. Maybe I will light a candle as well that night as well. And all right, so here is your answers to the trivia of these warblers behind me. Okay. All right, so we have a black-throated green warbler. We have the palm warbler, painted redstart, and I'm going from this direction up and around, by the way.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have the Cape May warbler and the golden-cheeked warbler. And actually, I will put in the chat the let's see if I have the mural, Audubon mural project, and you can learn more about it and see some of the other really amazing artwork that is out there. And each mural is, most of these murals are in New York, but if you're interested in these things and seeing art that are telling stories about birds or climate or habitat or ecosystems, then there are just a huge wealth of mural projects that are out there in every city, and they're worth taking a look at. So I will put that in there. Sorry, just a second. Going back and forth from screens here, so it's not as easy. Okay, so I put that there for you're interested in that. I earlier shared the Fulcrum Publishing site. I thank all of you for sticking around, and if you at this very last second are thinking, oh no, I wanted to tell a story, you're welcome to unmute yourself. But otherwise, I thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you again to Daniel. Thanks to Keith and Zach for moderating tonight, and all of you that told stories. If you did tell a story you get excited because you will be getting the Audubon After Dark sticker. So, all right, hopefully we'll see you next month. So have a good evening.